She lowered her eyes when he laughed out loud. The entire line in Manhattan's financial center stopped to watch. The man in the navy blue suit, Italian shoes and Swiss watch pointed to the small box of homemade candy in the girl's hand. "Do you really think anyone here is going to buy this? Go sell caramel to another neighborhood, sweetie." The people around her laughed. Some recorded it. Others just looked on with pity. She, in an old sweatshirt and with hands shaking from the cold, simply said, "It's okay, a no is already an answer." But before turning away, he added, "Girls like you have no future. Accept that life has already told you no." The silence after that was colder than the morning wind. 3 months later, on the same block, the same man, now surrounded by cameras and photographers, saw her image on the big screen at the International Social Innovation Awards ceremony. She was walking up on stage, wearing a simple dress and with a firm posture, being applauded by leaders, investors, and entrepreneurs from all over the world. The project? A community program that transformed bakery leftovers into artisanal sweets, generating income for single mothers and homeless youth. She smiled, took the microphone and said, "One day someone said no to me if the world gave me a stage." He stood still. The applause seemed louder than everything around him. No one there knew that he had humiliated her, but she knew, and her silence now screamed louder than any revenge. If this has touched you in any way, take advantage of this moment and leave a like now. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the rest of this story that is just beginning. Come with us. The wind cut through the narrow streets of Manhattan that autumn morning, carrying with it dry leaves and the distant sound of horns. The city pulsed with its relentless routine of haste, brilliance, and competition. In the middle of the concrete sidewalk, between modern cafes and mirrored buildings, a figure stood out. She wore a faded grey sweatshirt, jeans rolled up at the hem, and sneakers that had seen better days. In her hands, a small white box with artisanal sweets, caramels wrapped with red ribbon. With cautious steps and attentive eyes, she offered them one by one with a restrained smile, as if holding her own heart in her fingertips. Many looked away. Some didn't even look. Others just muttered a hurried, "No, thank you," without even stopping. And she continued, firm, as if she already knew that contempt was part of the path. Across the street, on the elevated terrace of a luxurious cafe, a group of executives gathered around marble tables and cups of imported coffee. All of them wore suits. Everyone was too busy with their screens, their bets, their sharp words. Among them, the center of attention was a tall man with a cynical smile, well-combed hair, and a self-confidence that seemed to ooze from his pores. Noah Westbrook, the youngest billionaire in the East Coast technology sector, was talking loudly about a new investment and making everyone laugh, as if he were in charge not only of his company, but of the environment itself. That was when he saw her crossing the street, slowly, carrying her sweets, like someone carrying hope. She stopped in front of the cafe, her voice low and gentle, asking if she could offer something. Everyone fell silent. Noah looked her up and down, as if examining an old piece of clothing hanging out of place. His friends waited for her reaction, already anticipating sarcasm. But she didn't back down. She offered simply, "It's just caramel, made by me. If you don't want it, that's okay." The gentleness in her gaze seemed strange there, and that bothered him. Noah gave a crooked smile and asked loudly, "Made by you? And do you think a place like this is a showcase for poor children's candy?" The laughter was automatic. One of her friends filmed it discreetly. She just took a deep breath and replied, "It doesn't hurt to try." He then stood up and walked towards her with slow, dramatic steps, as if he wanted to show everyone something. He took one of the candies and said, "If this is good, I'll buy it all. But if it's not, promise you'll stop dreaming." Her eyes fluttered. Inside they might break, but on the outside she stood firm. "You're free to not like it. I'm free to keep trying." She held out her hand, and it was in that simple gesture, in front of so many invisible cameras and sharp eyes, that the story began to unfold. Not through words, but through the silence she didn't break, and through the dignity he didn't understand. Her name was Emily Carter. She was born in Newark, New Jersey, where police sirens were more common than lullabies. Her mother, a painkiller addict since her teens, disappeared when Emily was just 7. Her father was never listed on her birth certificate. Raised by her grandmother, she learned early on that affection could also come in the form of silence and effort. The house was simple, with warped windows and a constant smell of stale bread. But there was love there. It was with her grandmother that Emily learned to make caramels. They started as a game, a way to distract the girl from her absences. They used leftover brown sugar, milk, and carefully stored drops of vanilla. The first batches came out hard, sometimes too sticky, but the laughter that came between mistakes and burnt pans made it all worth it. When her grandmother fell ill, Emily took care of the kitchen, the yard, the medicine, and her solitude. She was 12 years old and a silent maturity. She studied at a public school, sold candy at the supermarket entrance, and walked back with her torn shoes. She never begged for money. She learned to get by. When she was 15, she lost her grandmother. The world seemed to fall apart for the second time, but it was in her mourning that she rediscovered caramels. She began to test recipes, wrap them with ribbons she found on the sidewalk, and invent names that seemed magical. She took them to sell in squares, fairs, and even at funerals, because there, in the midst of her tears, people bought them out of pity, and she smiled with gratitude. A social worker tried to place her in shelters, but Emily preferred the streets to sharing space with screams and abuse. She slept in an abandoned garage, hid her candy in a metal box, and took showers with a hose in the back of a school. When she turned 18, she got a small room with the money from a local award for low-income young entrepreneurs. She created a simple website, but she still needed everything: equipment, support, advertising, credit. So she decided she would sell in the capital. That's how she arrived in Manhattan, with a backpack full of dreams and a box of caramels that seemed to wrap up her own story. She didn't want a handout. She wanted an opportunity. And she believed that, in the midst of so much luxury and rush, someone might taste and remember that life could also be sweet. It was with this thought that she woke up that morning, tied her hair with the last elastic band, and took the subway. She didn't know that that day would start with a no that would be heard by the whole world. But she went. Because even when everything told her to stop, Emily still believed that deep down there was room for hope, and it fit into a candy. On the 28th floor of one of Manhattan's most sophisticated buildings, the sound of laughter echoed between walls of glass and Italian marble. This was where Noah Westbrook ran not only his investment firm, but also the social game of New York's elite. A young, self-centered billionaire with a history of turning any situation into entertainment for his private audience. That morning, between meetings, he challenged his colleagues to a new distraction. "Let's see who can make a viral video today before lunch," he said, raising his coffee cup as if toasting boredom. His friends laughed. One of them, a digital marketing assistant, suggested filming something on the street, something that would have contrast, like, for example, a clash between worlds. That's when one of them pointed out the window. "Look at that girl with the candy. I know what we can do." Noah got up immediately, took the elevator, and went down with the confidence of someone who thought the world was a stage made just for his show. Downstairs, Emily, unaware of anything, offered the sweets with the same calm and dignity. Noah approached slowly, like a lion who knows everyone is watching. She recognized him from afar. His face was familiar. He had appeared in magazines and TV shows. For a second, she thought he might buy it out of kindness. But no. He picked up one of the caramels, held it up high as if examining a cheap piece of jewelry, and said, "I bet you $100 that no one here can swallow this without spitting it out." The laughter was instantaneous. The filming began. Someone in the group encouraged, "Come on, Noah, strike a pose." And he made a face, put the candy in his mouth, bit into it slowly, and spat theatrically on the floor right in front of her. "As expected," he said, wiping his mouth with a designer handkerchief. Emily didn't react, her eyes fixed on the spit candy, then back to him. There was no anger, just a silence that seemed to weigh more than any scream. She slowly picked up the box and replied, "It's not for everyone's taste anyway," and left. The scene was posted minutes. Later on, the profile of one of Noah's friends with the caption, "Bitter Sweets, another failed attempt to become an entrepreneur in the concrete jungle." The video went viral. The comments were divided between laughter and indignation. But Emily, when she got home that night, didn't cry. She just looked at her almost intact box of sweets, took out what was left, and put it in the freezer. They'll still be good for something, she told herself. And they were about to be good for much more than she could have imagined. The second meeting between Emily and Noah happened by chance, although fate was already drawing invisible lines between them. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and the weather had changed strangely, neither hot nor cold, but charged with a silent tension. Emily walked down 34th Street with her box of candy balanced in her arms, trying to avoid the curious gazes of the people who were beginning to recognize her from the video. She was not yet a celebrity of humiliation, but already some people murmured as she passed. As she turned the corner into Bryant Park, her eyes met for a second the familiar silhouette. Noah, once again in his expensive suit, was talking on the phone, walking quickly. The world seemed to slow down when he saw her, and for a moment they both stopped. Emily did not look away. Neither did he. She approached with firm steps, as if she had something to return, not with words, but with presence. "Mr. Westbrook," she said, in a tone that mixed irony and serenity. "I don't know if you remember me." He gave a half-smile, disconcerted. "Hard to forget," he replied. Silence fell between them for a few seconds, until she took a candy from the box, the same kind he had spat out days before, and held it out to him. "Want to try again? Maybe with less prejudice this time?" Noah hesitated. Her eyes were calm, but there was something there, a strength he couldn't name. "I'm not hungry," she replied, trying to sound indifferent. "It's not about hunger," she said. "It's about courage." And then she put the candy in his pocket without asking for permission. "When it's ready, it'll be there." And she left. Noah stood there for long seconds, watching the box move away among the passers-by. For the first time in a long time, he had no answer, no joke, no pose, just a strange feeling, as if something were changing, as if the tables had silently switched sides. He looked at his pocket, and then at the crowd, but she was already gone, and without. Knowing it, he had just tasted the taste of dignity, even without having bitten the candy. Emily's public humiliation hadn't stopped at the cafe's sidewalk. In less than 48 hours, the video had already been viewed over 300,000 times. Most people watched it, laughed, and forgot about it, but for her the echoes remained. On the subway, whispers. At the grocery store, dirty looks. At home, the silence was louder than any virtual chatter. Social media began to flood her inbox with jokes, memes, and even threats. One TikTok page compared her pastries to bars of soap. Another suggested she was faking poverty to get likes. Emily didn't respond. Not a single line, not a single tear. She just worked harder. She made new batches, she tested flavors, she sold less. She walked more slowly. One day, as she walked down the same sidewalk where the incident happened, a woman recognized her and said, "You're the girl in the video, right? The one who was humiliated." Emily responded with a slight nod, and simply said, "It wasn't the first time someone said I wasn't good enough." The woman was speechless. Some who passed by remembered her only as the Candy Girl, without knowing her name, without knowing her story. And yet, Emily carried on, with her box, with her dignity. Meanwhile, in the world of tall towers, Noah boasted about the reach of the publication. More than 500,000 in less than a week. I told you it would go viral. But something bothered him. Every time he put his hand in his jacket pocket, he felt the candy wrapper she had left. He never had the courage to throw it away. He also didn't have the courage to taste it. It was as if the wrapped candy held a mirror, one he avoided looking at, and even without knowing it, that piece of silent sweetness began to erode layers that he thought no longer existed. On the outside, he was still the same. On the inside, her silence began to speak, loudly, and without asking permission. It was on a rainy night, with thunder, cracking across the New York sky that Emily decided she would no longer run away from the stairs. She was at home, alone, wrapped in a thin blanket, when her cell phone alert vibrated. A new video from a new montage compared her face to that of a cartoon character, with a distorted voice. The captions mocked, "The failed pastry chef now wants to teach a moral lesson." Emily looked at the screen, and for the first time smiled. Not with irony, but with liberation. She knew. She knew from the first moment that everything had been set up, from the synchronized glances in the cafe, the hidden camera, the grotesque staging. But she hadn't said anything, not out of weakness, but out of strategy. Emily knew the world was watching, and now it was up to her to choose how she would be seen. She turned on her small laptop, opened her Page's website, and recorded a short video. The image was simple, her sitting, holding one of the sweets, and a single sentence. "It's not about the taste. It's about the courage to keep going." No mention of Noah, no attacks, no tears, just a reminder that she wasn't the victim they wanted to paint her as. By the next day, the video had racked up over 50,000 views. Small business owners were commenting. A Brooklyn bakery offered to partner with her. A community outreach program suggested support. Her name was being circulated in groups she'd never imagined she'd be able to access. Then she got a call. A woman from the Social Innovation Directorate of a large foundation was inviting her to pitch her project. "Your pastries feed more than just your body. They feed your purpose." Emily just smiled and said, "I've been waiting for you," and hung up. She walked to her window, holding the first of the new batch of pastries. The same flavor Noah had spat out, the same one she now packaged with a little phrase on the label. "For those who have heard too many no's and still keep going." That was it. She knew the stakes. She knew the game. She knew everything. And yet she chose silence. Because those who know their pain don't need an audience to win. Just keep going. And she would keep going until the world learns the taste of resistance, one caramel at a time. It was one morning, between reports and glasses of wine left on the glass balcony, that Noah typed her name for the first time in silence. Emily Carter. He didn't expect to find much, maybe just an outdated profile or an amateur online store. But what appeared before him made him sit back in his chair. A simple report from a community portal in Newark told the story of a young orphan who had transformed her grandmother's kitchen into a social project. Faded photos showed Emily as a child, next to an old woman in a flowery apron smiling as they stirred a pot together. The text explained how she had started selling sweets to survive, how she used the recipes to help other girls at risk, how she turned the little into something worthy. Noah read it, all 2-3 times. He watched the videos, and he felt something he couldn't name, a kind of warm discomfort in the middle of his chest. It was shame, maybe, or just humanity knocking on the door. When he looked for more information, he discovered that Emily had been a finalist for a Young Entrepreneurship Award, but couldn't attend the ceremony because she didn't have enough money for the ticket. He also read that she had turned down offers from companies that wanted to buy her recipe to profit from her image. "I don't sell my grandmother's name," said one of the highlighted sentences. Noah spent hours immersed in that story. Each click felt like a rear-view mirror. The woman he had humiliated on the street in front of his friends was the same woman who fed families with bakery leftovers. She was the same woman who took care of abandoned girls. She was the same woman who, despite having been spat on by him, had put a candy in his pocket, a symbol of something he still couldn't fully understand. And then, for the first time in a long time, he closed his laptop and looked out at the city. But he saw nothing, because inside him, everything was starting to change, slowly, painfully, as if the mask of superiority no longer fit his face, as if her silence was now louder than all the applause he had ever received. And for the first time, Noah wished he could go back in time. But time, like Emily's sweets, is not for sale. It can only be felt. And he was feeling it. Every piece, every word that was left unsaid, every no that she turned into a path. In the days that followed, Noah began to notice absences that had previously seemed irrelevant. Emily no longer walked the streets where she used to sell. The downtown coffee shop that had been the scene of the cruel scene now greeted customers in awkward silence. The video that had once provoked laughter had mysteriously disappeared from the networks. No one reposted it anymore. No one laughed anymore. Deep down, everyone knew that something had gone too far. Noah tried to move on with his life. He tried to maintain his sarcasm and control, but the taste of the candy in his pocket, still there, intact, seemed to grow heavier with each passing day. In meetings, his mind wandered. At parties, his laughter sounded fake. He began to search for her name at odd hours. He watched the short video she had posted, the one where she said it was about courage, not taste, and found himself listening to it on loop. He tried to find her. She even went as far as Newark, but no one could tell where she was. A local merchant said she had disappeared after a big proposal, but no one knew anything else. Emily had disappeared like someone picking up their own pieces and moving on in silence. And in that silence, Noah felt something he had never experienced before for the first time, longing for someone he had never had. Not romantic longing. It was something else, a moral failure, an absence of a mirror. He began to write and delete messages. He tried to find her online, but she was offline, invisible, like a dream that dissolves when you wake up. And what hurt the most was realizing that she had not disappeared to hurt him. She had just moved on, without needing to prove anything, without crying out for justice. She did not want a stage. She wanted peace. And now, he was the only one hearing the echo of it all. The candy was still there, intact in the inside pocket of his jacket, crushed but whole, like a reminder, like a gentle punishment. And in that grey dawn, Noah understood. She did not need to appear. It was her absence that was now deconstructing him from the inside, without a sound, without a word. Just the memory of that which he had never had the courage to swallow. Not the candy, not the mistake, not the reflection itself. Emily's absence did not go unnoticed for long. When her name appeared among the finalists for a major international award for social innovation, local media began to voraciously pursue her story. Newspapers, podcasts, and television channels wanted to know who the young woman was who had transformed artisanal sweets into collective dignity. That was how the old video resurfaced, but this time in a new light. Now, the public did not laugh. The public judged. Noah Westbrook, once hailed as a precocious business genius, was now the face of a public humiliation that had become a symbol of elitist arrogance. Comments flooded his social media. "Is this the leader who inspires your company? Congratulations, you spit on a winner." Investors began to question his image. Contracts were paused, invitations cancelled. One of the sponsors of his new investment platform publicly broke off the relationship, citing incompatibility of human values. And even if Noah tried to ignore it, it was impossible not to feel the ground shake. At a conference, he was booed discreetly as he took the stage. He tried to speak, but he stuttered. For the first time, his voice wavered. The humiliation he had inflicted on Emily was coming back, not with shouts, but with the same silence she had used to confront him. The press wanted answers. Did you know who she was? Do you regret what you did? Are you going to apologize publicly? He refused interviews. His advisors suggested an open letter. But he couldn't bring himself to write a single line, because any sentence would sound like a defense. And there was nothing to defend. There was only the bitter taste of his own vanity spat back out. The candy remained intact, now in his sock drawer like an object that burned without flame. And everything hurt more because she didn't ask for justice. She didn't appear on national television. She didn't sue. She didn't expose. She just won. And that was enough for the world to understand who was who. Noah, no matter how hard he tried, couldn't sleep. Because the punishment for those who hurt loudly is to be defeated in silence. And Emily had done it with the naturalness of someone who always knew her worth, even when the whole world tried to deny it. Noah's transformation began without him even realizing it. It wasn't a sudden change, nor was it the result of a motivational talk. It was slow, almost imperceptible. It began when he, for the first time, walked alone into a neighborhood bakery and bought a sweet without saying anything. He sat down on a bench in the square and stayed there, eating in silence, as if waiting to understand something. Then he started walking through the same places where he had mocked ordinary people. He looked at street vendors with respect he had never had before. He distanced himself from friends who only laughed when someone was humiliated. He stopped attending social events. He cancelled interviews. He started listening more, reading more, and most importantly, remembering. He remembered Emily's look when he handed her that sweet for the second time. He remembered her silence, stronger than any words. And it was this silence that pushed him onto a new path. He created an anonymous support fund for micro-entrepreneurs without access to credit. No mention of his name, no image of him associated with it. He discreetly donated part of his stock to an organization that supported homeless women. And every morning before starting his day, he would open the drawer and look at the candy. It was still there, aged, deformed, but present, as a reminder of who he had been and who he was trying to stop being. People around him began to notice. The Noah of today listened more than he spoke. He greeted employees by name. He sat down with interns to understand their stories, not because he wanted to appear humble, but because deep down he no longer knew how to be the same. And in this silent search for redemption, he understood that apologizing was not enough. He had to change, not to prove anything to anyone, but so that, perhaps one day, he would be worthy of looking someone like Emily in the eye and not looking away. And in that painful, solitary and honest process, Noah discovered that the true taste of transformation did not come from victory. It came from well-digested shame, from guilt transformed into action, from the arrogance overcome by the recognition that sometimes a crushed candy can be worth more than an entire fortune, because some mistakes cannot be erased, but they can be used to build a new beginning, even if it is silent, even if it takes time, even if it hurts. Emily and Noah's reunion happened in the least expected place, a social entrepreneurship event held inside an old renovated train station in Newark. She was there to present the results of her project, now expanded to more than 5 cities. She went up on stage with her hair tied up, wearing a navy blue dress and a steady gaze. She spoke clearly, with facts, with soul. She showed videos of women who, thanks to her teachings, were now supporting their families with the same sweets. At the end of the presentation, the audience stood up, long, sincere applause, but Emily didn't smile. She just thanked them with a discreet nod. When she got off the stage, amidst greetings and flashes, she saw a familiar figure in the background, Noah, standing alone among the last ones. There was no press around him, no pose, just lowered eyes and trembling hands holding something, a package. Emily walked slowly towards him. Her steps seemed to weigh more than the time that had passed. When she stopped in front of him, he looked up and said simply, "It's still here." And he held out the crushed candy, the same one from so many months ago. Emily looked at him, then at the candy, and said in a calm voice, "I figured you wouldn't have the courage to throw it away." Noah took a deep breath. "It took me a while to understand, and when I did, I didn't know if I deserved to be heard." She didn't answer. She just took the candy back, put it in her bag and said, "You don't need to be heard. You need to keep listening." And she turned to leave. Noah didn't try to stop her. He didn't call out to her. He didn't explain. He stood there, watching her walk through the corridors of the old station. A woman, a story, a force that he would never be able to ignore again. And in that moment, without exchanging smiles, without touching each other, they both knew that something had ended. Not as an end, but as a circle that was finally closing. Not with words, but with respect, and with the silence of someone who understood too late the value of a presence. After the reunion, the days went by calmly. No scandals, no headlines. Emily went back to her routine, which now included meetings with investors, moderated interviews, and afternoons teaching teenagers how to make sweets as a tool for autonomy. Her image grew, but she maintained the same serene look. In interviews, she never mentioned names. When asked about the video, she elegantly deflected. It was just a moment. What matters is what happens afterward. Noah, despite regaining part of his reputation, was no longer the same. He refused invitations to panels on young leadership, avoided cameras, and spoke little. He continued to support anonymous initiatives and maintained the fund for micro-entrepreneurs under a pseudonym. One day, a journalist ran into him by chance and asked, "Do you regret what you did to her?" Noah simply replied, "Regret is an understatement, but it's also useless if it doesn't." Translate into action. The answer went viral, but Emily didn't even comment. It was on a rainy afternoon that she made her decision. She was in her old kitchen, now renovated, looking at a shelf of prized sweets when she opened the last box she kept. Inside was the crushed caramel that Noah had returned. She looked at it for a long time, then took it out of the paper, placed it on a saucer, and melted it in a bain-marie. She added new ingredients. She mixed it calmly. She created a new flavor. By the end of the afternoon, that sweet had become part of a new recipe, resilience with touches of dignity and silence. She didn't tell anyone about it, but when she tasted it, she smiled. Her way of forgiving was to keep going. It was to not carry it. It was to transform even the hurt into raw material. When asked later, on a podcast, if she would ever speak to the man in the video again, she answered lightly, "Maybe. But it's not necessary. Some stories need to end inside us." And there it was clear that her decision had been made. Emily didn't hate him. She didn't love him either. She had simply left him where he belonged, in the past. She didn't need to see him again to move on. She had everything she needed, her name cleared, her story intact, and a candy that now held not pain but healing. And that for her was more than enough. In the small window of a discreet shop in Brooklyn, among dried flower arrangements and glass jars with handwritten labels, there was a candy that stood out. It wasn't the most colorful nor the most expensive, but it was the most sought after. It was called Caramelized Silence. It didn't come with a description or advertising, just a thin ribbon and a simple symbol, a circle with a dot in the center. Emily would walk by sometimes just to see if anyone would choose it, and almost always someone did. A child, an elderly person, a distracted woman, and they all seemed to savor it calmly. No rush, no cell phone in hand, just in the moment. One afternoon, a man in a suit came into the store. His hair was already graying, his posture more restrained. He looked at the candies, walked to the shelf, and picked up just that one. "This one? What does it taste like?" he asked the clerk. She smiled and replied, "It tastes like someone has already swallowed a lot before speaking." He said nothing. He paid. He left. Outside, he opened the candy. He took a slow bite. He closed his eyes, not out of longing, nor out of regret, but out of respect, and he kept walking. The city moved on, the lights came on, and in the window the empty space of the suite was quickly filled, like everything in life, because the world goes on, and silence, sometimes, is the only sound that remains. If you've come this far, it's because this story also spoke to you in some way, so comment below. I've been underestimated too, but I remain silent. This shows that you are not alone, and your voice, even in silence, has power. Take advantage and leave your like now. Subscribe to the channel to continue following stories that touch you deeply, and click on the video that is appearing on the screen now. It is another story that will touch your heart. See you there.